The Princess and the Frog. A new chef in town. Tiana dipped a spoon into a pot of bubbling stew. She thought as she took a taste. Just enough spice. She made a note in her secret recipe book. She was working on a brand new dish at her restaurant. The restaurant was always packed with people who came from near and far to try Tiana's food, especially her gumbo. Tiana hung her apron on its hook. "Time to greet the customers," she announced as she exited the kitchen. Tiana went from table to table, saying hello and making sure everyone was happy. Eventually, she arrived at a table where one man was sitting alone. "Are you enjoying your meal today?" she asked the man. The man glanced up. "The okra was satisfactory. The rice was interesting. And the gumbo was disappointing," he told her. Disappointing? Tiana wondered in surprise. Her gumbo was her best-selling dish. Tiana walked over to where her friend Charlotte was sitting. She told Charlotte what the man had said. "Oh, Tia," Charlotte cooed. "That's Leon Robert. He told me he was one of the most famous chefs in the world. I saw him here last week, too. He just opened up a restaurant in town and, oh, you must try his gumbo. It's divine." Tiana looked back at Leon. He was happily eating some beignets. When he saw Tiana, he frowned and put down the beignets. The next day, the whole town seemed to be buzzing with excitement about Leon's new restaurant. And Tiana kept hearing about that gumbo of his. She decided she had to try it. That night, she and Naveen went to Leon's restaurant. "Now let's see what all the fuss is about," Naveen said when 2 beautiful bowls of gumbo arrived at the table. Tiana took a bite. Her brow furrowed. She took another bite. Her eyes widened. She took a 3rd bite. "Wow, this is almost as good as yours," Naveen said excitedly as he scarfed down the gumbo. "Naveen," Tiana said calmly, "this isn't almost as good as mine. It is mine." Naveen looked up, confused. "The veggies, the spices, even the way the sausage is cut. It's all exactly the same. Leon copied my recipe." Tiana whispered to him so no one else could hear. She had to say something to Leon. She decided she would simply tell him that she knew he had used her family recipe. She was sure he would apologize and stop what he was doing. But Leon did not apologize. "Are you calling me a thief?" he yelled when Tiana confronted him the next day. "I would never use another chef's recipe, especially not a bad recipe." Tiana was shocked. What would she do now? Then she had an idea. "Okay," she began. "If you didn't take my recipe, then prove it. I challenge you to a gumbo cook-off tomorrow at noon. No cookbooks or recipes." Leon paused for a moment. Then he puffed out his chest and said, "Fine, we will cook at my restaurant." That night, Tiana could barely sleep. Word had gotten out about the cook-off, and lots of people would be at Leon's restaurant. What if he hadn't taken her recipe after all? What if his gumbo really was better than hers? What if people stopped coming to her restaurant? Her mind raced with questions. The next day, a huge crowd gathered at the restaurant. In the kitchen, Tiana and Leon faced off. Tiana noticed how tired Leon looked. He must not have slept well either. Tiana dashed about the kitchen, grabbing ingredients. She asked Leon where the peppers were, but he didn't answer her. She couldn't find a good ladle either. Then, as she was rushing to the stove, Tiana nearly slipped on some water on the floor. "Daddy would have told me to take my time," she thought. With renewed confidence, she sprinkled some thyme into her pot. Meanwhile, Leon was having trouble of his own. But Tiana didn't know that. She hadn't noticed when he glanced over to see how many stalks of celery she was using. She hadn't noticed when he used vinegar instead of oil, and she hadn't noticed when he poured twice as much salt into the pot as he was supposed to. Tiana put the finishing touches on her gumbo. She tasted it. She thought it was good, but was it good enough to beat Leon? The two chefs handed out bowls of gumbo to the hungry people who had gathered. Then Tiana watched as one person tasted her gumbo, and a slow smile spread across his face. She saw another person do the same, and another, and another. And then she noticed something peculiar. Someone else was spitting out Leon's gumbo. Another person looked green in the face, and another person drank an entire glass of water after one bite. What was going on? "Leon, may I try your gumbo?" Tiana asked the chef. Leon hesitated. Well, if you must," he managed to say, handing her a bowl. Tiana took a bite and nearly gagged. "I'm sorry," she said, "but what is this?" Leon shook his head and let out a heavy sigh. "You were right, chef," he confessed. "I did manage to get a hold of your secret gumbo recipe. I stayed up all night trying to memorize it, but I obviously failed." Leon looked at the floor. "I am very sorry." Leon explained that when he came to town, all he heard about was Tiana's gumbo. Since he had never cooked gumbo before, he sneaked into her kitchen and found her secret recipe book when he visited her restaurant one day. Tiana listened to Leon's story. She thought it over for a moment. Leon really did look sorry. "I have an idea," she said. "I will teach you how to make a basic gumbo. Then you can add some twists to make it your own. In return, you will tell everyone that you borrowed my recipe." Leon smiled and shook Tiana's hand. "You've got yourself a deal," he replied. "But I have one more favor to ask. Could I have a bowl of your gumbo?" Tiana laughed. "One bowl of Tiana's top secret gumbo coming right up," she said.